All right, so navigation, and this, by the way, is Barnegat Lighthouse. It's in New Jersey. And again, I'm back in the air taking pictures. But lighthouses are reference points. They're a way to figure out where you are. And so we're going to talk in this part of the module about navigation and how to figure out where you are, how users find where they are, and how they figure out where they're going. Now, we talked briefly about the card sort in the last module, and that is the way that you figure out what the taxonomy is going to look like. In a lot of cases, your navigation is going to mimic or at least be very similar to the card sort output that you did earlier. So navigation types, in general, we try and think of some simple kinds of navigational tools. Whenever you're in a website or wherever you're in a system, a top navigation is global. It should stick around. The left navigation is for more local things that are in the same area you're in. You have a breadcrumb type navigation, which allows you to back up. You know, there's a beep, beep, beep of the truck. That's backup navigation. And then inside of the content, whatever the content is that you're creating on a web page, you can have article links or content navigation. Now, one way to think about this is that the global navigation, the top navigation, is interstates. It's going to get you from major area to major area. If I drive from Indianapolis, where I live, to Cincinnati, I'm going to take an interstate. But the local streets are going to need to be there to help me get from my home to the interstate. And then once I get to the interstate, to wherever it is I'm exactly going inside of Cincinnati. So we need all the navigation, but it has different purposes. There are different city streets in Cincinnati than Indianapolis. That's great, and that's fine. They're laid out, the cities are laid out differently. My goal is just to come up with a range of navigation options that gets me to my target. Now, by the way of example, I want to show you an Office 365 SharePoint site. And these boxes just indicate the different ways that you can click, the links that you can click on the page. You can see it's quite busy, but 1 is a set of utility links, and 2 is your name, and 3 is a site settings. It's a gear to get you into the back end. 4 is a set of quick links. 5 is what they call a sweet bar. It's kind of a super top navigation. 6 is your top navigation. 7 is our left-hand navigation, so it's the things that are more recent. And then 8 and 9 are some flyouts and some things for special context stuff that happens. If you look at this picture, this is a really busy picture of different ways that you can navigate inside of a standard SharePoint 2013 site. Our goal is to focus on what is currently in 6 and 7. That's the top and the left navigation. You may, if you're in a large organization, need something like 5, which is a super top navigation. But primarily, you're going to try and get to a common 6, something that is pretty common for people to see across an entire area, and 7, which allows you to get into the specific details. All right, so whenever you build a system and it's got lots and lots of sites, whenever it's got lots of different collaboration spaces, you're probably going to need a site directory. And the idea is that the site directory gets people to infrequently used places where they have to have permission, and you're going to build that directory by letting people add the sites so that, there's an underwater basket weaving group inside of the company and I want to join that. You don't typically put all that stuff up into navigation because it doesn't make sense for most people. You can also use search to find things in the site directory, and sometimes we'll target links to people based on their group membership. And so if we know that they have security to something or they have an affinity for a particular group, we'll put those into kind of a short list that pops up in the main menu, in the top menu. Or we can send them to the site directory. The reality is that most people are going to probably bookmark these that they need. So I want to talk just for a second about a sitemap. Some people are still using sitemaps, and the reality is they were built when sites had 100 pages. And if you've got an intranet that you're building and you're trying to figure out an information architecture for it, you're going to have thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. Sitemaps are really not the best approach to trying to help people navigate. Working on search, working on your taxonomy, working on your navigation, those are the things that are really going to get you big bang for your buck. If you're going to do a sitemap, if you say, I have to have it, just do key content. Don't try to get every news story or everything, because your page is going to be way too long. As I said, search really is a big replacement for sitemaps. It's just so much easier to find something with search than it is to use a sitemap. So how do we think about navigation? Well, as it turns out, most of the way that we think about navigation actually goes back to the 1960s in a book by Kevin Lynch. And Kevin was really talking about how do you architect the city. And he was talking about the list here that you see of 6 things. Maps and signs, those are direction, landmarks, ever-present reference points. So for instance, in Washington, D.C., you can see the Washington Monument. In Paris, you can see the Eiffel Tower. There are things that are visible in most cities from everywhere. Paths, these are channels of movement, so roads and walking paths, bike paths, those things. Edges, which are barriers, so maybe it's a wall. Districts, which are major areas. Again, if you're in Paris, you can tell that the city is broken up into different districts. And then nodes, which are intersections. It's where all these places meet. And so this is kind of a high-level way of thinking about how do we navigate inside of a system. And we use those landmarks, and those are the things that we want to have on the top menu. Those help us figure out where we're at, particularly if we color code them or if we provide some indication of what the current location is. We're really trying to mimic our navigation in the computer system to the way that people find things in a city. We have discovered that the psychology behind these navigation in cities is actually pretty good. It's got lots of experience on us that have been just doing computer stuff. So here's these 6 items are things to think about as you're trying to design your navigation for your system.